Hi, my name is Corin Perdomo, and today I will be speaking to you a little bit about the impact of teratogen on development and later personality. Teratogen is something that can cause birth defects or abnormalities in a developing embryo or fetus upon exposure. For example, there are harmful teratogens, environmental teratogens, non-harmful teratogens. Um, So, some harmful teratogens include viruses, nicotine, alcohol, prescription drugs, recreational drugs, radiation, bacteria. Some teratogens are in two ways exposed. You can expose yourself to a teratogen by ingesting or drinking, also in an environmental exposure. It can be biological, chemical, or physical, and can have a very detrimental effect to your fetus when you are pregnant. For example, health problems like diabetes, low blood pressure, that can cause risk to your pregnancy and your fetus when having a baby. Non-teratogenetic agents include amphetamine, prenatal vitamins, caffeine intake, mercury intake. For example, when you are pregnant, you're giving a list from your doctors usually that explain the cans and cannots when you are pregnant. For example, um, you cannot drink alcohol, you cannot smoke, you cannot do drugs, you cannot take certain prescription drugs. Over-the-counter amphetamine or ibuprofen can be taken in moderations. For example, take one instead of two, or take it instead of five times a week, you take it one time a week. Coffee intake needs to be decreased, so not to expose your child to certain abnormalities or defects such as hyperactivity, anxiety, depression. Caffeine can be a cause of those things, especially a lot of caffeine intake. For example, they say to take 1 cup of coffee a day instead of 4 or 3, or 1 cup every other day, depending on the person's natural intake of caffeine. Teratogens can begin to have a negative impact on the fetus in as early as 10 to 14 days and even up to delivery, and then have very negative and harmful effects after delivery into early childhood, teenage, and adulthood. For example, when a woman smokes during her pregnancy, the baby or infant can be born with a very low blood oxygen. They could have a stillbirth, which means the baby is born and it is deceased. They are at a higher exposure to SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. That is usually a death from an infant under 1 year old that happens very suddenly and very unexplainable. But most people that consume alcohol and smoke tobacco or nicotine during their pregnancy expose their child and have a higher risk of SIDS. You are also prone to premature birth weight and low birth weight in your infant when they are born if you smoke or drink during your pregnancy or have recreational drug use. Most research has shown that a person that is exposed to harmful teratogens have a lot of abnormalities and defects emotionally and mentally. For example, it is very hard to discipline them because they are hypersensitive and hyperactive. So you will see them be more active in a sense that it's hard to control. They have major emotional problems and usually have really hard time making friends or having stable relationships. And a very high percentage of people grow into adulthood and become addicts themselves, whether it be alcohol, drugs, or smoking. These because they're exposed to these harmful teratogens in um, childbirth, in fetuses and embryos, they are at a higher risk to developing these abnormalities when they are adults. Excuse me. Um, the problems from teratogens are not only emotional, but they are mental as well. Can develop bipolar disorder or other disorders, and personality disorders in children and adults because of the exposure to these teratogens, whether they be environmental or ingestion. Now, I got I researched, a lot of my research came from these two journals on these websites. One was written by A. Muldean called Teratogens, What is It? And the other was written by a Chinapa, Tanjbanchachai. Oh, I know I butchered that name. I'm so sorry. But it was very helpful research. I also researched in the textbook that I was given by my professor. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you learned a little bit about teratogens and how much they can have an impact on a woman when she is pregnant and their fetus.